Somewhere in Orlando, a restaurant that survived 17 years, thousands of late nights, and one nasty lawsuit between its own founders shut its doors in a single weekend, and it did it without telling a single customer why. No press release, no goodbye post, no warning sign taped to the door explaining what happened. Just locked doors, dark menu screens, and a line of confused customers standing outside wondering if their favorite midnight taco spot was ever coming back. This is the story of Gringos Locos, and by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly how a beloved local chain with a cult following can collapse almost overnight, and why so many restaurants are quietly disappearing the exact same way. Let's go back to the beginning, because to understand how something falls apart this fast, you have to understand how it was built in the first place. Gringos Locos opened its doors on Washington Street in downtown Orlando back in 2009. It wasn't backed by some massive restaurant conglomerate. It was a small, scrappy Tex-Mex spot built around homemade salsas, marinades, and a signature dish that would go on to define the entire brand, the Double D. 2 tacos, 1 soft shell, 1 hard shell, glued together with melted cheese into a single, ridiculous, unforgettable bite. It sounds simple. It was simple, and that simplicity is exactly why it worked. Within a few years, the concept caught on. Orlando's downtown nightlife scene needed something that wasn't a bar and wasn't a chain, and Gringos Locos filled that gap perfectly. It became one of the few spots open deep into the night, catering to the after-midnight crowds stumbling out of clubs and bars looking for something greasy, cheesy, and fast. That single decision, staying open when almost nobody else would, built the foundation of a loyal, almost obsessive customer base. People didn't just eat there, they built routines around it. It became part of the culture of going out in downtown Orlando. Success brought expansion, and expansion brought a second location on the University of Central Florida campus in 2018, followed by a third in the SoDo district that same year. On paper, this looked like a growing local success story, a homegrown restaurant chain doing what so many small businesses dream of doing, scaling up without losing its identity. But underneath the surface, something had already started cracking, and it happened years before anyone saw locked doors.
In 2017, a falling out between the restaurant's founders spilled into public view. One of the original owners filed a lawsuit against his business partner, a dispute serious enough to eventually push him out of the company entirely. He went on to launch his own restaurant concepts elsewhere in the city. Business partnerships breaking apart isn't unusual, but it's rarely just about money. It's almost always about control, about vision, about who gets to decide what the company becomes next. And when a founder who helped build the culture of a company walks away or gets pushed away, something intangible often leaves with him. Sometimes a business survives that loss just fine. Sometimes it's the first quiet crack in a foundation that takes years to fully collapse. For a while, Gringos Locos kept going, the late-night crowds kept coming, the Double D kept its cult following. The chain even picked up recognition in local best-of polls, winning categories for best tacos year after year. But somewhere in the last few years, longtime customers started noticing something shifting. Prices crept upward. Portion sizes and quality, according to repeated customer complaints, started slipping. None of this happened overnight. It happened slowly, the way most business decline actually happens, one small compromise at a time, easy to dismiss individually, impossible to ignore collectively. Then came the moment nobody saw coming, or at least nobody outside the company saw coming. On a Friday night in late July, staff members were reportedly told that the very next day, Saturday, August 1st, would be the final day of operation for every single location. Not a slow wind-down, not a gradual closure of underperforming stores while stronger locations stayed open. All of them, all at once, with barely 24 hours of notice given to the people who actually worked there. By Saturday night, word had spread through social media faster than any official statement ever could. Lines formed outside the downtown, Milk District, and SoDo locations as people rushed to get one final Double D before it was gone. Nobody, including the employees serving those last orders, seemed entirely sure whether this closure was temporary or permanent. The confusion itself became part of the story. And then, by Monday morning, any doubt evaporated. Reporters visiting the downtown location found the doors locked, the lights off, the menu screens dark, despite signage still claiming the restaurant opened daily at 11. No employees inside, no manager available, no official statement from the company, even as calls placed to their corporate number rolled straight to voicemail.
What makes this particular collapse so unsettling isn't just that it happened, it's how it happened. According to employees who later spoke to local reporters, the reasoning given internally was vague at best, something along the lines of the company needing to work through its finances. No severance, no formal notice period, no real explanation offered to the very people who had spent years serving customers behind the counter. One worker pointed out something that stings with a particular kind of irony. The same company that required staff to give 2 weeks' notice before quitting or advance warning before taking time off gave its own employees barely a day's warning before eliminating their jobs entirely. There's also a financial detail buried in employee accounts that deserves attention because it hints at exactly the kind of slow bleed that often precedes a sudden collapse like this. Multiple former staff members mentioned changes around how customers could pay and how tips were handled, changes that reportedly favored the company's bottom line over the workers actually earning those tips. It's a small detail on its own, but small details like that tend to be symptoms, not causes. When a business starts squeezing margins out of its own frontline workers, it's usually because the margins everywhere else have already stopped being enough. So what actually killed Gringos Locos? The honest answer is that it probably wasn't one single thing. It was several forces converging at once, the kind of slow-motion collision that's becoming disturbingly common across the restaurant industry right now. Rising costs for ingredients, labor, and rent have been squeezing restaurant margins for years, margins that were often razor-thin even in good times. Consumer habits have shifted too, with more diners ordering through delivery apps that take a significant cut of every transaction, and with younger customers spending less on going out than previous generations did at the same age, and competition has only intensified, with new concepts opening constantly, all fighting over the same shrinking pool of hungry, price-conscious customers. Gringos Locos wasn't alone in feeling this pressure, and that's actually the part of this story that turns it from a single sad headline into something bigger. Just weeks earlier, another well-known Mexican restaurant chain, On the Border, shut down its remaining locations entirely, years after being pulled out of one bankruptcy, only to eventually fail again. Around the same time, another regional Tex-Mex chain, Tijuana Flats, had already gone through its own painful restructuring, filing for bankruptcy protection and closing over a dozen locations in an attempt to survive. 3 different companies, 3 different ownership structures, 3 different cities, all circling the exact same drain within the same stretch of months.
This is where the story stops being just about tacos and starts being about something much larger happening across the entire restaurant industry. Independent and regional chains, the ones without the enormous marketing budgets and negotiating power of national franchises, are getting squeezed from every direction at once. They can't buy ingredients as cheaply as massive chains that purchase in bulk across thousands of locations. They can't absorb a bad month or a bad year the way a company backed by private equity or a large parent corporation can. When their margins disappear, they don't have years of financial cushioning to fall back on. They just stop. There's a psychological piece to this story too, one that rarely gets talked about but shows up in almost every restaurant collapse like this. Employees at struggling restaurants often sense something is wrong long before management ever confirms it. Hours get cut, supply deliveries get inconsistent, certain menu items mysteriously become unavailable more often than they used to. But because nobody wants to be the one to say the business is dying, everyone just keeps showing up, keeps serving food, keeps pretending things are normal right up until the day they suddenly aren't. That's exactly what played out here. Employees reportedly noticed items quietly disappearing from the menu listed as out of stock more and more frequently in the weeks before the final closure. Small warning signs, ignored or explained away, right up until there was nothing left to explain. And this is where accountability becomes murky, because in situations like this, the person actually running daily operations is often not the person who ultimately controls the company's fate. According to accounts shared by employees, the majority stakeholder behind Gringos Locos reportedly had other profitable business interests entirely separate from this restaurant chain, meaning losing this particular company wouldn't meaningfully impact him personally. When ownership is structured that way, spread across a portfolio of unrelated ventures, a single struggling brand can become disposable in a way it never could be for someone whose entire livelihood depended on it surviving. It's not necessarily malicious, it's just a different kind of math, one where a business doesn't need to be saved if the person controlling it has other places to put his money and attention. So where does that leave the people who actually cared about this place? The customers who built routines around it, the employees who served thousands of double Ds over the years, the local economy that quietly loses another downtown business. The truth is uncomfortable, but it's honest. Passionate customers and loyal employees rarely have any real say in whether a business survives. Love for a restaurant doesn't show up on a balance sheet. Nostalgia doesn't cover payroll. A business can be adored by its community and still collapse in a single weekend if the underlying financials stopped working long before anyone on the outside noticed. What happened to Gringos Locos isn't really a story about one restaurant or even about tacos at all. It's a story about how fragile, even beloved, decades-old local businesses have become in an economy where costs keep climbing, margins keep shrinking, and a single bad stretch can undo 17 years of goodwill in the span of one quiet Saturday night. The lights went out, the menu screens went dark, and somewhere in Orlando, a line of customers stood outside a locked door, holding on to the memory of a taco they didn't know they were eating for the last time.